Now I've pinned the back and front pieces together. I've pinned on the shoulders and under the neckline, and if you can see, everything is aligned, and then I will join the shoulders. Now I've just hung up the shirt just to demonstrate before joining the sides. I've completed the shoulders, and if at this stage you can pop this over your head to see if it fits okay here. The shoulders shouldn't be drooping and they shouldn't be too small either. If you try this on at this stage before doing the final, and then you've got your inner curve, so this should all be fitting well. If there's a problem, if the shoulders are drooping or it's overlapping your underarm over here or here and it's coming to in, that means then there's probably been a mistake in the pattern. If the shoulders fit perfectly, please try this on as you would wear a proper kameez, not on top of any other clothes, and then you'll get a good idea. So it's like trying on a sleeveless shirt without the seams on the side. Have a look in the mirror and check that it fits okay. If this is okay, then we'll go into the next step. I will show you how to mark, pin, and then mark the sides. The next step will be joining the sides, and then finally the sleeves, then the side hemmings, and finally the back neckline. If some of you have already done the back neckline, that's okay too. In the previous step, I showed you how to lay out the material back and front pieces together. Make sure they're inside out, number one, and you'll be able to tell from the front because you'll see the seams of the shoulder. In the previous step, I showed you how to pin along the sides all the way down. That was only to make sure the fabric's in place. This is a silkier fabric, that's why it's more tricky. But what you need to do next is, as you can see, follow the same way of aligning the pins. That's what I'd like you to do. If you follow this, remove the pins from the side and take them towards the middle, making sure the fabric is smooth, there's no lumps or bumps anywhere in the fabric. The reason is because you will need to work your way outwards, and sometimes when you're cutting the fabric it can be slightly uneven, so you're not don't worry about joining these pieces, otherwise it may gather in the middle. So as long as it's smooth here, then we just work our way out towards that side. But as you can see on the other side, I've marked 1 inch. Remember on our pattern we aligned, on our pattern before we did 1 inch for, we included 1 inch for seam allowance. Now depending, if you measure from right under from your armhole on your body, how far down you want the slits to start, then measure it. On this pattern I've measured, and the slits can be 15 inches down from below the underarm, and I will just draw a line with my chalk. And this is a chalk wheel, which is quite a handy tool. Now, as we did for our pattern, just remember whether you included 1 inch seam allowance from the top or 1.5. So check with your pattern and follow all the way down. For this pattern it was 1 inch. And I keep marking 1 inch all along. As my seam allowance guide. And this was the purpose of cutting the pattern using precise measurements, because as you can see now, everything's aligned and it sits together well. So that's what will give a neat product in the end. Then I will pin along just a little bit close to the seam allowance where I'm going to be stitching, but make sure you smooth out any unevenness at the same time. And you pin along all the way down so that your fabric doesn't move when you're stitching. It helps in the stitching process. And we'll do exactly the same on the other side and we'll stitch. But when I get to the machine, I won't be able to show you the next step. So I'll just show you here. When you sew along here, you've made your mark here. I think taking 1 inch from the side. The chalk line on both sides should be 1 inch inwards, and when you get here you just stitch it. When you've done these two when you've stitched these seams, do the same thing. Pop it over your head, turn it around inside out, take the pins out and try it once to check you've got the fitting. If it's okay, loose, tight, then you can adjust it at this stage before joining the sleeves. Right, now it's time to stitch both the back and front parts together. Remember, we've pinned along here, so make sure that it's nice and smooth. Don't worry if it's not even on the outside, because remember we cut two pieces separately, the front and back. As long as they're aligned here, there may be a slight difference there. Now just sew along the seam line that you just chalked up to the point where you want your slits to go. And remember, all this is 1 inch inwards. And here I've been very careful to make sure that my borders match. See, everything's aligned. Over here you can see the borders have matched, so I've been careful. Only do one stitch for this, a single stitch, and then you can go over with a double stitch afterwards, because you need to try this on first. We repeat the same process on the other side. Now I've turned out the kameez, and again at this stage it's best to try this on and see if it fits well on the sides, and if you need to tighten it more, you can tighten it more. If it's too tight, then you can loosen it. But the other thing to bear in mind is that slits that you made, make sure that they don't come down too low on the hip that it becomes too tight. At the same time, make sure it's not too high that it's exposing the waist either. But I think, so that's just something that you can try and see. So it's the same here. You can see the slits are roughly around here, and this one is okay. It's not too low down by the hips. After this, the next and final stage will be putting the sleeves on and then hemming the sides and the neckline. The next step we have to do is attach our sleeves. The best way to do this is if you lay it out like I have, and this is the front of your kameez, which is slightly deeper, and then your sleeves will also, remember we said the front side will be deeper. So this is facing towards me, this is my left, and this is my right. And then you just pin it all together. The next step we have to do is attach our sleeves. The best way to do this is if you lay it out like I have, and this is the front of your kameez, which is slightly deeper, and then your sleeves will also, remember we said the front side will be deeper. So this is facing towards me, this is my left, and this is my right. And then you just pin it all together. As you can see now, the sleeve is pinned up all the way around. I used the folding, like I said, if you iron and you join the folding line with the seam here, and then you pin, but you keep these together and you make sure, because remember the sleeve was on a curve, and that's how it should be. And now you do exactly the same with the left sleeve, whichever one you start from. Like this, you take the fold. Can you see it's exactly in line with the shoulder seam? And you pin. And then you keep doing this all the way around.